Right. Welcome to the last talk of SteelCon. And just a general thing, if you want to fall asleep, please do, just don't snore, okay? If I start snoring, please tell me. Right, so, keep us here. My general talk today is about vulnerabilities and aren't. So, I'm not certain what we got from here. I can see a few pen testers. We got anybody from the other side? Yeah. So the people who get the reports go, why are they reporting on this rubbish? Which is generally what I've found, and I've had many years of writing the same old crap into reports. Just checking there's no children. No, that's okay. So it's just a general talk about these. So this is me. That is a burning Furby. It's been my avatar for about 12 years and various different social medias. Hi, I'm Dave. There. I'm also the grumpy person who is pretty much the embodiment of the actually meme. Somebody posts something up about like how they have to drink 8 bottles of water a day or you'll dehydrate massively. I'm the one who goes, well, I think you'll find. Some would say I've had to actually mute my in-laws because I had to stop myself doing it. So this is where a lot of this comes from. Is I sit there and I look at the sort of myths and I go, that's bollocks. So where am I going? Yeah. So sort of to explain, back in the noughties, I moved from Unix admin to a security guy. And I don't know anybody remembers 2000 in the security field. You had Saint and Satan, you had Mmap, that was it. Then a product called Nessus came along, which everybody started using for everything. Eventually went commercial because they did. Skipping back to my notes now. But in those days, you had mailing lists. You didn't have massive collections of TVEs. You had no exploit DB. Most of the stuff you had to write yourself or use Nessus. So I've written a few scripts. This one is revealing how old I am. And unfortunately, this is one of those ones that's responsible for one of the things that we often get. Anybody seen NTP mode 6? Because that's basically that finding. And I saw that in a report 2 days ago that I QA'd and had to then say, take it out. It's absolute bobbins. So I just find it irritating that we report stuff that has no real risk, that there's no way of exploiting it. There's no way of manipulation of it. And we waste time trying to evidence it. We waste time trying to write about it. You guys waste time reviewing it, reviewing the risk on it, and eventually fixing the damn thing. And it serves very little purpose. So I'm just going to go through a few sample error messages. It's a bit of audience participation. I want you to see whether you can guess what Nessus by default scores these. So Tomcat 404 error messages. So if you go the default 404 error message, you go to Tomcat, there's a page there, it says page not found. What does Nessus score that at? Anybody for starters? Well, number, a CVSS number. 6. Any advanced on 6? Oh, you're a cynic after my own heart. It's actually 5, which is a bit overkill because 5 is a medium risk. A medium risk generally says you can exploit this, you can pull information from it, you can try and break things with it. That seems rather excessive. Unencrypted telnet. So the literal logic is it looks at port 23 and sees whether it has start TLS. Any idea of the CVSS? It's not quite that bad. 7? Any advance on 7 other than 9.8? Nope. It's 5.8. Which, as you can see, compared to the previous one, is a bit strange. Actually, that's one score I agree with. It's about that anyway. Bearing in mind that to exploit that, you have to be on the same network segment, you have to have an administrative position, or be on a wireless segment to actually sniff that data. Or the cam table gets full in the router. Something weird like that has to happen. That is quite difficult to exploit in the real world. SSL version 2 enabled. Bearing in mind there are people here who are younger than SSLv2. It came in 1996, so anybody who was born after that is younger than SSLv2. I'm just looking to see whether there's anybody that old. Young. Oh. Are you young, Chloe? Yeah. So, any ideas of what that is? So, all data will be encrypted. There's a vulnerability of a padding oracle. And my sentence tails off in the end because I didn't finish writing that sentence. Any idea where that goes? 8? I mean, technically, unencrypted telnet is 5.8, so it should be less than that in theory, shouldn't it? But it's Nessus, so that's 7.1. That's the high risk. That literally means drop everything and fix. Which, comparatively, you have to be in the same place, but you're getting encrypted data. So it's actually, compared to that one should be higher. Final one is SSL anonymous ciphers. So anonymous ciphers are basically unencrypted data. You can select a cipher, it's not encrypted. It's not necessarily preferred, it's in the list. It's one of those ones that can be chosen. You can exploit it by setting up initiation or in advance or doing man-in-the-middle attacks. How much do you guess that is? 7? That would be sensible. So, just in the order that they do in levels of risk, it's random. I honestly cannot work out the logic on this. So, I've attempted to make my own way of doing a CVSS score for TLS findings. There's a Python script. I'm planning to put this in place, and this is what I shall be using in future reports, because it's better logic than Nessus has. I'm not actually just picking on Nessus here. There are other tools that are just as bad. Metasploit. And Nessus does save a lot of work, and as long as you actually quantify what it is. But this is a problem. These scores are random, and half of those things I clicked, there's no real-world exploit. Well, Telnet maybe. Let's go into a few examples of things that I've seen reported on since the year 2000. And let's start with cross-site tracing. So, does anybody know what cross-site tracing is? I'm hoping the pen testers do. But cross-site tracing is you have a trace variable which is used for debugging, and it responds with the headers directly as it is. So that's it in one command. It's not really that exciting. So it can be used to do sort of like cross-site attacks, CSRF, or cause type attacks. It's basically a sort of grandfather of those. And generally it will abuse anything on the user agent to try and pass data back and forth. I'm just annoying him because he has to keep on moving the camera to catch me. So there is actually reference, there's a sort of passive-aggressive comment in the Apache manual about it, which basically goes, this is not a security vulnerability. And because Apache is the only web server out there that actually supports trace nowadays. So I thought I'd try trace, so try and actually do a trace request using all the cross-site ones in the browser. Here's it in Chrome. Fails. Let's try Edge. Edge is Chromium. Fails the same error message. So Chromium doesn't support it. What about Firefox? I'm getting really desperate now. Internet Explorer. Nothing. Last exploit that you could do was in the ActiveX HTTP request module, which was last supported in IE7, which was out of support in 2010, I think. As in, even if you could exploit it, there's nothing really there. So, modern day is if we can't find an exploit, let's have a look at any possible CVEs. There are 11 CVEs. How many are, say, traces enabled on a server? 10 of them. There is one real exploit only, which is a buffer overflow in Java System Web Server from 2010, and Java System Web Server no longer exists. This is a total rubbish finding. It serves no purpose. It's really hard to exploit. There is one possibility. If there's a very specific build which you have a WAF or any sort of caching web service in front of, you could potentially use it to try and smuggle a header through. I've never seen a situation where I can do this. So let's nip on to the next one. Etag. I'm starting to see people snore now. So an Etag header is a header designed for caching. So if you make a request for something that's static content, it returns an Etag header. It's that Etag, which is composed of an inode, a size of file, and a timestamp. So if the timestamp changes, the size of file changes, the server knows to actually, the client knows to re-request that resource and not bother caching it. It's just a method of saving it. The one vulnerability in it is it serves the inode. The inode itself can potentially be used in a few things. There is only one thing that I've ever found that it can do, and that's NFS, which is network file sharing on Unix. I'm actually responsible for the Etag problem because I put a plugin in Nikto about 2008 to actually look for it, and everybody else copied it. So that is how an NFS. So I'll go back to NFS. NFS has something called a file handle, which is how it uniquely identifies a file that can be found or a directory. The file handle includes the inode. You can see in there, this is sort of the Linux file handle. So there's where it has the inode. So it needs to find the inode there. And as you can see, there's not really much entropy there. If I can potentially guess the inode, I can potentially get everything in that. I can potentially get an NFS file handle. Problem is, I need a web server, I need an NFS server, they need to be on the same thing. So I need all this to be true to actually do that. I need the Etag to give out valid inodes, I need NFS to be in the save server to be enabled. They all need to be on the same volume, they all need to be exported, and the version of S needs to be really ancient. Again, I've never seen this in 20 years of pen testing. Oops. I'm just going to walk back and check my notes again. So it's another thing that can't be exported. Checking CVEs. And any guess on how many CVEs exist for this? Any number?
28.
2. Whole 2. First one is a program in ServerMask from 2003. ServerMask no longer exists. And it does not hide Etag. And then there's the original one to say what it is. Again, I saw this in a recent report. Why are we reporting this? It doesn't really serve a purpose. Going on to unquoted spaces, which is something that you always see in build reviews. So Windows is a bit weird in how it deals with it. It's designed to be accepting of change. So if you have space, it doesn't do a centralized parsing like Bash does. It parses everything individually. So you have space in there can be a bit weird. As you can sort of see the logic, if you have no quotes, it just creates files. And if one quote, it will sort of treat it as if it's got quotes or not. Which is fine, except for if you want to try and call a program with different amounts of quotes. So if I type that command in, Windows will try the following order, and it will try calling gym.exe with parameters of all those. So it will try those in order. So have the preference the ones without the spaces. I'm just realizing how quickly I'm racing through my slides. So if we go on to this one, so if we see this in a service definition, a service name, a run or a run once, and we see program files Bob, first thing it's going to try and do is run program.exe. So in theory, if we can replace program.exe and create a file called that, we can run any code we want. Anybody see the flaw with that one? The flaw is we need to access C://, which we need to be administrators to do. So it's a bit difficult. I have seen real world where this will happen on D drives or E drives or F drives, but it's something where you have to check. CVEs is a bit complicated. We have lots of CVEs going back. This first came out in the year 2000 NT bug track where it's first listed. And it's covered by a whole CWE. Very few, most of these CVEs are actually just for a missing quote in program files, and they can't actually be exploited because they're all on C drive. TLS vulnerabilities. So we have multiple, again, most of our reports on webs are TLS. And we have multiple vulnerabilities on those. There's some of the big ones. Actually, I've got Heartbleed in. Heartbleed is one that I should potentially be worried about, but I haven't seen a Heartbleed exploitable for 5 years. Most of these are vulnerabilities on SSL v3, which we very rarely see. The only one I'm going to concentrate on is the last one, which is Sweet32. So Sweet32 is where you can sniff traffic, and if you use 64-bit block ciphers, you can potentially decode it. Problem is, you need 785 gig of traffic. So you need to be in a place where you can intercept. You need to be in a place where you can sniff a terabyte of traffic, almost a terabyte. In fact, from the actual research paper where they exploit this, they have a quote, in our proof of concept demo, this attack currently takes less than 2 days. But keeping a web collection alive for 2 days, connection alive for 2 days may not seem very practical, but it worked in the lab. So I've reported Sweet32 multiple times. In every report I've QA'd has had Sweet32 in there at some point, listing the very ciphers. So it's just more generalization about it. So I'm just going to go into conclusions. Don't believe your tooling. Don't believe the scores in your tooling. Some things are just totally wrong. Use a bit of common sense. Confirm what you find. Always confirm what you find. Because something is, just because Nessa says something is exploitable doesn't mean it is. Just because Nikto says something is exploitable doesn't mean it is. Because some of that stuff I wrote, I was drunk. Actually try and exploit stuff. Just prove that you can do it. And score your risk appropriately. Don't copy. Because it's not always right. And as long as you're consistent internally, and look at past vulnerabilities, look at those CVEs, look inside exploit DB, make sure whether they're still valid. Some of this stuff could do with fixing, but we have informational vulnerabilities for that. Let's just save people some time. And at that point, I'm going to ask for questions because I raced through my slides. Not that I'm nervous or anything, but, hi, yeah.
So how do you deal with the inevitable question from your client when you give them a report and they say you're awful because we ran Nessus and we got 7.1?
This is big sort of one that's difficult to deal with. So the question is what happens when your client pulls you up and says, what happens when your client pulls you up and says what you say isn't what's reported on Nessus? What I say to that one is just be prepared to explain your reasons why. Half the reason why we why we report things is simply because everybody else reports them. Cookies, for example, we report because everybody else reports them. There's no risk. Android unobfuscated files. Who cares? But report it because everybody else does. And if you don't report it, your customer will go, why do you do that? So I would just say argue. Get a movement to try and get everybody to actually look at these things properly and maybe move things around. Sorry.
Do you think there's any chance of the vulnerability scanner manufacturers coming along on this journey? Because to the other point, that's the problem.
Yeah.
If they weren't coming up with vulnerability scanners before, we wouldn't be reporting them. So is there any chance that you think about moving and reducing ratings?
So the question is whether vulnerability scanners, the people who produce vulnerability scanners can start being educated on this, or whether we can raise. I have tried. There's actually a thread that if you Google my name, you can actually find where I think it was Rob and I were taking Rapid7 to task with one of their scores, and they went, in the end, we decided to keep it. I'd love to do it. I just need to, I think it's probably one thing that we should try and submit as bug reports every time we see them, but that adds overhead. So I'm happy for people to try. I've had my fights with the Tenable guys in the past. But the more people who do it, the better. Dave? Not about Hornets, though.
I would caveat your texts.
Yep.
You don't be able to do the production. Some things are
Yeah.
bring it down.
No, live dangerously.
I mean, you guys are used to bringing systems down.
YOLO.
I think that there are movements in some of the vulnerability spaces around like you see the CV and the temporal score and all
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. And there is now a movement in some of them where they allow you to reclassify things based on your environment.
Yeah.
The problem is people need us as professionals to come in and do that for them.
Well,
The scanner can't take context.
yeah.
And I think the about that and understand the next thing.
I mean, technically, syspaton, though I haven't had sys for 10 years because I let it expire, we report stuff, risk management goes, oh, that's not valid, we'll rescore that for our risk. That's great for those big companies, but some of our customers, I've known more than the whole of them put together in IT, and I'm not being big-headed about that. It's just they don't have any idea. I literally had to do a scope from somebody who went, we know nothing. We don't even know what a firewall is. So that's a great concept, a big company. Little companies can't do that. So understand, and that's one to push. So at the back.
Yeah, so what's your approach when you deal with the vulnerabilities? Is it either, we just write it from the report and they want to get the report involved? Or is it more, we just hold on the information and if we get to it, we can get to it.
So the question there was, what do you do when you find these sort of things? I normally turn them down to informational. And that's what I sort of push when we do QAs as well. And I quite rant a bit because I'm quite ranty. So I try and turn them down to informational because some of the ones, it's like compliance. It's like getting your password set to 27 characters is a good idea, but it's not going to fix every single problem type thing. So I try and migrate them down because it's a good thing to do. Stuart. Yeah. Yes. That's sort of where you have to give feedback to the pen test firm, but that's a problem with the pen test industry as a whole. This is sort of half my argument, is downgrade some of this stuff that's irrelevant to an info, and then you can just go, if you don't fix it, you don't fix it. Concentrate on patching that server because it's running something that's 2 years out of date. That's where you should be concentrating, because anybody who's actually tried doing a real-world exploit of somewhere, if you had any red teamers in here? Nope. The red team is generally, they fish. They walk into somewhere, they plug in a network. That's how they do it. They don't go, oh, I've found an Etag. The real world exploits you're going to get are directly attacking your domains. So we'd rather you patch everything to get up to date than just don't care about the little things. So that's my sort of statement. And last one, yeah.
So from the engineering side of it, we've always been taught sort of fix the vulnerabilities even if they're not a problem in case someone changes the TLS.
Yeah.
Does that kind of come into the scope of thinking about program files on?
Yeah. Yes, you can. Sorry. So the question is should we fix them anyway because they might cause problems further down the line? So somebody will always install it in D colon because that's it, and they'll have the permission set badly in D colon. That happens. It's why you really should downgrade them it's to lower the priority. So if you've got, a SQL injection in your code, that's much more important to get fixed. Having a C colon program is like a minor thing that can go in a release at some point. So it's not to stop people reporting this, it's just to say, don't concentrate on the weak stuff. Reg, sorry, I'm terrible with names.
Are there any, so we recently had a sales pitch from an intender who was talking about their custom scoring that they do with CVS plus exploit.
Yeah.
Are there any vendors who are doing that really well?
I decline to answer that question. So the question is, are there any vendors who do scoring really well? None that I've seen. But I have quite ranty about CVSS as well, but that's a different kettle of fish. So I'm afraid that needs to be analysed in respect to your own risk department. That's CISPATON, which I don't have anymore. Any more? Right at the back. Scott. Oh, I didn't take the mick out your site, though. I think it comes from, I can't remember your name, sorry, I should know it. Back to you, Keith. What Keith said is we report stuff because our tools say stuff. And everybody else says it. So if I do a test, then if I don't say it, if John does a test there and he says it, I'll get into trouble because I didn't say it. So I think it's a bit of paranoia that it was a good test because you didn't report this, and it's trivial. So that's generally where I think it comes from. Yeah.
It also comes from a place of insecurity. If there's a thing that you don't personally know how it works, you don't want to be the person who doesn't report it.
That's totally valid. And I can't really. I can't say anything about that one because, there are reasons why people report. It's very hard to get into trouble for not reporting something. Sorry, for reporting something when it's there. Sorry, Sen.
No, I was just saying it's almost a cultural thing where that's how you're trained, that's how you're conditioned. As a pen tester, you want to have that completeness, and you don't want to miss anything out. But I agree with you that a lot of the stuff is indeed, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but it needs to be kicked down with information. Of course, I try to do that all the time, and this gives me great arguments to go back to a customer that was trying to just switch over to just vulnerability management.
Yeah.
Phone scanning. And was asking me, well, what's the point of pen testing? You guys charge so much. And this is the point of pen testing, is that validation from someone who's experiencing difference. Yeah. Not just doing quite a CVSS work.
So this started out of a series of blog posts I did. So I've only done 3 so far, and I do mean to continue it because it's just they take a long time to do research on. So if you look at our blog, pentestpartners.com/blog, and if you search for, I think, vulnerabilities that aren't, you'll find the articles there. So if you do need to argue, it's like you can point them that way. Yeah. But that's generally it. So I'm going to say thank you, and I do apologise. It's a bit short, but You can have half an hour of your life you can get back.